Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 24th of May, comes to you from London. And we start by looking at the dollar just sinking a little bit lower back into short-term bearish territory over the last 24 hours. So we are just seeing short-term bearishness there, but the medium and long term is still bullish. That means that the euro is recovering a little bit against the dollar. Is not quite looking as bullish on, and these medium and long-term charts still bearish, and we've got lots of downside targets. So we expect any revival in the euro to be fairly short-lived. Against the Japanese yen, we see the dollar is falling away a bit. Again, it's it's bearish in the short term, but medium and long term still holding up, and the yen is a safe haven. And of course, we are seeing a lot of turmoil with trade wars at the moment. Sterling falling on political woes in the UK, $1.26. We're down 3.5% over the last week. This has been a 13-day negative run for sterling. Today is actually the first positive-looking day that we've seen in a couple of weeks, but the day, of course, has only just started. We'll have to see how that pans out. But for the moment, sterling looking pretty bearish with downside targets activated. So still not a great picture. Against the euro, sterling also struggling to hold on, turning now medium-term bearish and long-term bearish. So sterling was looking like the stronger currency, starting to look a little bit weaker. Against the Swiss franc, we're sitting at 126.97 this morning, and that's also looking more and more bearish on the medium-term chart. Bitcoin is down slightly this morning, sitting at $7,800, just holding on. This will be interesting. Is this a continuation pattern? Do we go higher from here, or is this a reversal pattern? We'll need to keep an eye on that for Bitcoin. The S&P index was down pretty heavily yesterday in the US, down over 1% for US stocks. So we are seeing quite a big sell-off, and we'll look at the individual stocks in a minute. The Nasdaq short-term bearish has been now for a couple of weeks, and the Dow also looking bearish. That sold off over 1% as well. And the broader based Russell index making new lows, really starting to look quite worrying there as we see the market just rolling over. The futures this morning for the S&P is up 0.5%, and the Nasdaq E-mini also up about 0.5%. Looks like we might see some bear closing for the end of the week. And if we look at the FTSE 100 this morning in the UK, we're up 0.6%. That's reflecting that slight recovery. And UK midcaps, although they're still pretty bearish, putting in a bit of a recovery. But the chart is not looking good for the second line stocks. Xetra DAX we see this morning in Germany, we're up 0.75%, and the CAC 40 in Paris is up about 0.2%, but still in bearish territory on that short-term chart. Asia was mostly up. We saw the Nikkei up very slightly, little change there to be honest. The Hang Seng up 0.5%, and Shanghai again, little change there as well, still looking fairly bearish on that short-term chart. New lows here would break support. It's like an ascending triangle pattern. If we descending triangle pattern, if we fall lower, that will be quite bad for Chinese stocks. And we're seeing here downside targets. Trade war fears still dominating really global markets this week. Looking at the Sensex in India up 1.4% on Modi's re-election. That's looking very strong. The Indian market has looked strong for some time. Aussie market bucking the trend down 0.5%, so not looking as good. Brent crude is up 0.8% this morning, so we fell below the $70 mark yesterday, but we're recovering a little bit at the moment. But the seasonality effect is now pretty much over for the year, and we should expect to see crude oil really struggling to perform on trend, and WTI also falling away. US nat gas sitting at $2.58, still looking short-term bearish, and we've just really been teetering along, just sinking lower. Hard to believe we were nudging $4 just several months ago. Looking at gold, we're sitting at 12.83 this morning, just starting to recover a little bit and looking into that short-term bullishness. And if we look at silver, we see much the same picture, just looking a little bit more bullish. US 10-year yields struggling, sitting at 2.32%. They've really fallen away in the last 48 hours. We had targets to this area, of course, and those targets have been given and now met. Looking at the individual stocks, we start by looking at the Dow Jones Index overnight. The best performer here was Home Depot, up 1.6%. It's that chart actually teetering up and down. We see here we're pretty flat on the relative to the Dow Jones Index, but we are still holding on into bullish territory. On the downside, we had Apple off a massive 3.7%. That's not good news for tech stocks in the market generally. We had United Technologies, they were down 3.6%, Goldman Sachs down 3.5%, ExxonMobil down 3.2%. A lot of fallers there. Looking at the Nasdaq 100, we had Insight was the best performer. We see here less than 10% of stocks were up. It was a real rout last night in the Nasdaq. Qualcomm down a further 12%, so that's really coming off the top there. Not looking great. They were as much as 30% outperforming, and that we're just giving up now those gains. So we had quite a lot of big falls there. Tesla below the $200 mark, not looking good at all. So a lot of big fallers there in tech stocks. In the Aussie market, we saw we were falling. We had Ansell Limited, they were up 3.4%. They're looking quite strong. On the downside, we had Galaxy Resources down 6.5%, Pilbara Minerals down 5.6%. A lot of these resource stocks being hit, which is why the Aussie market didn't perform so well. China was fairly flat, not a lot to show there. India, we see here the prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. India looking very strong indeed. Hindustan Petroleum up 4.6%. Bharti Airtel up 3.6%. Really bucking the trend there. The Indian market looking very strong indeed. And only a handful of stocks down. Oil and natural gas down 1.4%, for example. And if we look at Europe this morning, we're seeing a little bit of a recovery as we reported there. On the UK market, we've got ITV up 2%, and Marks and Spencer also up 2%. A lot of these stocks really just showing relief rallies over really big sell-offs of late. We see TUI up 1.8% and Vodafone up 1.75%, but really has had a terrible run this last year or so. Taking a look at the the worst performers, Centrica down 1%. Their woes continue, so we're seeing being hit there. Taking a look at the FTSE 250, we've got Ferex Pro, they're up nearly 5%. Babcock International up 4.4%, so we really are seeing quite a fall away there. And Foreign Colonial down 1.4%, so they're being hit a bit there. But we're seeing mostly stocks are up. If we look to the European majors, this is the Stocks 50 index. We see Volkswagen, a relief rally there. They've had a terrible run recently, of course. Orange up 1.6%. Daimler up 1.5%, but the chart still looks pretty terrible. And if we look at the worst performers in Europe, we've only got one stock down in the Euro Stocks, and that's Amadeus IT Group, and very little changed. So we're seeing quite a big relief rally. Looks like the US will open higher. Monday's a holiday, so we will see you on Tuesday. Have a great long weekend. Until then, happy charting. See you then. Bye for now.